Welcome to Trust AI Partners, where we dive into the cutting edge of tech innovation. Join us as we explore how AI automation is transforming the industry. If you're ready to discover the future of AI innovation and how your company can get ahead, stay tuned and connect with us for more information. I'm your host, Jim Hoover, and joining us today is Rob Wolf, co-founder of LMNT, or is it Lament? I should clarify.
LMNT. Yes, I should have prepped you on
Okay.
that beforehand. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Rob is widely known for reshaping the conversation around nutrition, fitness, and health through his work as a best-selling author and entrepreneur. His personal journey into discovering the critical importance of electrolytes sparked what he calls the salty rebellion, leading to the creation of LMNT, a fast-growing brand that solves real pain points for athletes, professionals, and everyday people. Rob, it's fantastic to have you here. Before we dive in, I'd love for you to introduce yourself in your own words and tell our listeners a little bit more about LMNT's mission.
Yeah, I guess some maybe interesting broad brushstroke stuff. I was a research biochemist in my past life. I went on to co-found the first and fourth CrossFit affiliate gyms in the world. So if people like CrossFit, I was right at the beginning of that. If they hate CrossFit, then I'm kind of like the guy that spread syphilis across a college campus or something. I wrote a couple of New York Times bestselling books. I hold a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and yeah, I've been. It's kind of funny. I would call myself a small E entrepreneur. I've been found the necessity to be entrepreneurial because I usually don't fit well within the structure of most other uh, organizations, governmental, private, you know, what have you. So I've just out of necessity, I would call myself an entrepreneur. My co-founder James Murphy, who is our CEO, I would call a capital E entrepreneur. That is just baked into his DNA. When he was 7 years old, I think he grew up in Florida. They had a spot, a really kind of prime spot on their street where they could see a bald eagle nest from their kind of front yard, and he would charge people 50 cents a look. He had a table, a nice cozy chair, and a set of binoculars that people could bird watch from his front yard. And I was never that entrepreneurial as a kid. I was more of a science geek. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit of background.
Awesome. Well, being different makes you, or not fitting into a perfect box makes you more interesting, right?
One one hopes so. That's the positive spin, I guess, to put on that. Yeah, yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is what's been the most surprising feedback you've received from Element customers so far?
Most surprising. That's a really great question. I mean, we get a lot of feedback. It's maybe worth noting, like when we launched, which is 7 years ago, I had a pretty good I had a sense that there was a blue ocean hidden there in the electrolyte, hydration space. And it's kind of weird looking back when you think about Gatorade and Powerade and the things that were in the space. But I had a significant health problems almost 30 years ago. I almost died from ulcerative colitis, and the process of regaining my health involved getting onto a low carb ketogenic type diet. And as helpful as that is as a way of managing gut and autoimmune issues, it's really rough for a lot of other things, including when one eats a minimally processed diet, you usually don't get in a lot of sodium. And then when one is eating a low carb diet, our body doesn't hold on to the sodium. So I always struggled doing things like CrossFit and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu because I was just in a chronically low kind of sodium state. And I wasn't afraid of salting my food or eating things that had some salt in it, but just the type of food I ate was naturally pretty low salt. And it was working with a friend of mine, Luis Villasenor, who's one of our other co-founders. He's really a great coach in this ketogenic diet space. And when he looked at what I was up to, he said, I really think that you're super deficient in sodium. And of course, whenever we talk to an expert, of course, we ignore their advice for at least a good year. And it took me about that long to come around and actually listen to Luis. But when I finally figured out that sodium and electrolyte piece of the puzzle, was literally like a light switch was flipped. Like I can't adequately describe what an improvement that was for my health and my performance, my sleep, just really all encompassing. And of course, that's very self-serving because I'm the guy that is slinging salt. But I mean, that's the God's honest truth, of why I felt like there was a real opportunity here. And so I guess circling back to your original question, I think that a lot of people are very surprised that that say like energy needs, like they may feel really lethargic mid-afternoon or something, and they think they need another shot of espresso or a tea or something like that. And I would say for a ton of people, particularly if they're active, if they live in a hot, humid environment, if they live at altitude, like there's a lot of different situations that um, increase our electrolyte needs. Those folks find that if they address the electrolytes, and you don't have to do element, you could eat a handful of pickles, you could do olives, like any type of a salty food will usually address that. But what they find is that if they address the underlying electrolyte needs, that their energy levels are dramatically improved and they didn't need another dose of caffeine. Is maybe I think one of the things that is most surprising to the folks that find something like Element is that they've maybe been operating in a chronically sodium deficient state, or it transiently in and out of a low sodium state, and they feel markedly better when they address that.
I'm curious, how common is this low sodium problem? Are you aware of percentages?
So if we back up, unfortunately, in the United States, only about 7% of the population is metabolically healthy. Before COVID, it was about 12, and then in a 2-year period, we lost about 50% of the folks that were metabolically healthy. So I would actually say the vast majority of people running around are probably not suffering from this because they're overfed. They tend to become insulin resistant, which actually causes them to retain sodium. And it's not as the whole like, do low sodium diets benefit people is probably a topic outside the scope of what you might want to jump into for this podcast. But when you get into a cross section of people, police, military, fire, first responders, athletes, CrossFit, anybody modifying their diet, like eating a cleaner diet, those are the folks that are typically pretty low sodium. 75 to 80% of the sodium that Americans consume comes from processed foods. So if one simply changes their diet to a minimally processed whole food kind of eating, doesn't have to be necessarily low carb, you just automatically cut out the vast majority of the sodium that folks are consuming. So unfortunately, I would say the vast majority of the US is kind of like bloated up like a tick from being insulin resistant and retaining water and sodium and probably being hypertensive. But then there's this other cross section of people that do eat well, probably are pretty active, maybe live in a hot, humid environment. And those folks really do desperately need some amount of electrolyte top off, at least transiently.
Interesting. And I imagine with somebody at a black belt level in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, discipline is a regular part of your mindset and your daily lifestyle. But setting that aside, what's keeping you motivated after all these years outside of running the business?
Man, so I'm married. My wife's Italian, and she's pretty hot. When we met, there were 5 women at Chico State University for every guy. So I super married up. So that's kind of a motivation to try to stay in shape and live as long as I can. I know I'll have a successor because she's pretty good looking and smart and everything. But when I croak, I just want to occupy as much of her life as I can so that whoever comes after me when I'm dead, they have a short run on it. And then I have 2 kids, 2 girls, 13 and 11. Trying to be as engaged and connected with my girls as I possibly can is a huge deal. I am very fortunate that I'm a co-founder at Element, but I work daily with the company, and I kind of honestly expected to be put out to pasture at some point because I'm easily the oldest dude on the team. I'm 53, and I think the average age on the team is maybe like 35 or something like that. So I'm literally like a generation older than the bulk of the folks there. But it's a great team, and what's cool about it is for the first time in my life, I only do the things that I'm both good at and really, really enjoy. I'm good at content generation and kind of some big picture kind of philosophical planning around the business and the way that we approach things. I have a great relationship with our other co-founder and CEO, James Murphy, and so we get to rap about some pretty big picture types of things within the company. And I really love all of that. Like, I get to be part of an awesome team. I have a good wife, good home life. I like being in shape because I did almost die from the ulcerative colitis like almost 30 years ago. I'm about 100. I'm 5'9". I'm about 175 pounds right now. At the low ebb of the ulcerative colitis, I was 125 pounds. So if you imagine 50 pounds less of me, like I almost died from that. So I am very grateful for like every day that I'm given to be able to do the work that I do. I get to be creative. We seem to be making a positive impact both on the folks who use our product, but just the local environment here in Bozeman. Like, we've really invested pretty big in our local area. We're trying to build a campus here that includes like some functional medicine for the larger community and some things like that. We are just standing up a research foundation where we are donating money to different metabolic health research initiatives. So that's really exciting because that was kind of the way that I started into the world, was as a bench level research biochemist. So we've reached a level of success that we're able to actually parse out a decent amount of money to underwrite some basic scientific research. So those are all things that keep me motivated, keep me excited. There's something, interesting problems to solve along the way, and the hope of hopefully doing some good work too.
Yeah, right on. And you mentioned the current team that you have in place. I'm curious, what's the team size, and how does your team structure support growth at this stage?
So the size is the easier one. We're about 45 folks. We have about 12 people here in Bozeman, full time. Maybe another 12 are pretty high rotation. Like, maybe they have a second house here or something like that. We because this is, I'm used to usually going on like nutrition and health podcasts. Since this is a business oriented podcast, it's maybe worth going into a little bit of the way we structure our year, and then I'll try to circle back around about the growth question. Maybe you'll have to prompt me on that, but we were maybe 18 months in to our process when we were founded, and we had a couple of teammates kind of burn out. Like, a startup is a really massive ask of folks. There's a lot of stress, a lot of work, and I was talking to our CEO James, and I really have kind of an ancestral health kind of hunter gatherer perspective to things, and just kind of an evolutionary biology perspective. And when you look at the demands of a startup, you're asked to both sprint and marathon at the same time. Like, you're supposed to run as fast as you possibly can, potentially for years or maybe even like a decade, and then there's some hope of like an exit, and hopefully you haven't destroyed your life, destroyed your family, and everything along the way. There's a lot of collateral damage oftentimes with that. My wife was a co-founder of a tech startup, and out of the initial group, there were like 4 suicides within that company. So like, there's a lot of attrition that happens with that. So I suggested that we try something in which folks would work really, really hard for 3 weeks, and then we would basically have one week off. And I mean, like, off. You do very light email check in and whatnot. And so this was 18 months going towards 20 months in, and we gave this a shot, and we call it rest and assess, where we will set up our OKRs or KPIs, whatever it is that you're on the hook for this 3-week block. And if you need help with things, you ask for help. Like, it's very transparent. And then you just work like the Dickens to get your shit done in a timely fashion. Like, you got that 3-week block, and then at the end of that 3 weeks, we circle back up and we kind of look back. What did you get done? What did you not get done? How are you going to tackle what you didn't achieve in the next block do you need help? Do you need other resources? Like, do you need a continuing ed? Do you need an extra set of hands? What have you. But then there's a week off where everybody in the team sets an autoresponder. We're in our monthly rest and assess period. I'll circle back with you on this date, which is usually about a week later. And ideally within that period, the first couple of days, like, you are just out. If you need doctor's appointments, a massage, whatever, go do that stuff. And then about day 3 of that 7-day period, we encourage folks to really look at what they did in that previous sprint and start thinking about it. And again, very, very light email contact, light touch with all that stuff. And then throughout that remaining like 3 to 4 days, really formulating your game plan for what you're going to do for the next sprint. And so what we found is that if people are really working diligently, by the end of a sprint, they're smoked. Like, they're really looking forward to that little block of time off. And then usually 2 or 3 days of seriously unplugging, folks are feeling pretty good. And then they are in a kind of a clear headspace to look back and critically assess what that last sprint looked like. And then they're able to look forward and try to figure out what they're going to do next. And I know that, like, physical service places may be difficult to do this, like a restaurant and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how one, makes a program like this work. But James is a graduate of Yale, and he's been working on kind of a Yale Business School piece about our rest and assess approach. I think that it's been absolutely indispensable piece of our success, because folks tend to be very good at working in a highly focused, hard fashion, but you can't do that forever. The productivity starts dropping off, burnout starts becoming a real problem. But people can work really, really hard in intervals. Like, you get that maximum focus, you really lean into the project, and then you step back. And when everybody steps back, like, the honest aside here is that the people that we've seen struggle the most are the people who don't really lean into the rest and assess. Like, they're still farting around, doing more than what they should be doing during that time. And it's actually been some of our senior leadership. And when we've done some of our yearly planning, we've been kind of holding their feet to the fire. It's like, man, you got to lean into this process. Like, you are clearly burned out and you're clearly struggling. And it's more valuable for you to step back and be here for the long haul than it is for you to flame out and just be done and need to go into a different project. So I do think that is a really critical feature of our success. And then again, looping back to your original question, like the way we manage growth, we have a really dynamic team. Like, we have definitely developed different departments and whatnot, but we do have some standard operating procedures, but we like to use the term, we have guidelines, not rules. Like, we really try to get people to own different elements of whatever it is that they're responsible for. And if they need help or they have a question, that's great. But we really want people to have ownership of what they're doing and then just deliver. And there's hopefully light in the micromanaging, from there. I think has been super effective. And we will not infrequently have people really migrate through the company. They may start off in supply chain and then they find themselves finishing, or at least currently, in finance. Like, we just discover hidden talents or an area that somebody starts in. The company may change in a way that position doesn't really make sense anymore, but we know that person is really talented and they have an interest in a different area. And so we will plug them into a different area. So, we've broken the company into different teams with kind of, pyramids within that, but we try to have maybe 3 to 5 person groups, so that there's lots of decentralization of the leadership and the org chart and all that type of stuff. And I think that's a little bit different than the way that a lot of companies do it. The only thing that I've seen that maybe breaks down somewhat similar in that regard is like some special operations communities like SEAL teams and stuff like that seem to parse out the leadership and the responsibility in these smaller group kind of platoon based formats, and that's maybe the closest thing that I've seen, and we just kind of organically arrived at a structure like that.
It seems like an innovative work schedule and structure, and probably, I imagine, a testament to the company's growth and success so far. And by the way, have you installed a jujitsu arena at the headquarters yet?
Yeah, so in our basement we have a nice gym. We have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber down there to take advantage of for like recovery, and there's all kinds of health benefits for it. And then yeah, we've got a little mat space down in the basement. The basement is actually pretty nice at our headquarters, and we have 6, 7 people that are really
Yeah.
actively into jujitsu currently out of the whole team. So so as part of that sprint rest sequence, usually week 2 of the sprint, probably 95% of the team shows up in Bozeman so that we all have in person. So about once a month, 1 week of the month, everybody kind of comes to town, and then yeah, we'll get in some good training during that time. It's awesome. But we have a lot of people that run and do triathlons and stuff like that. But everybody's pretty into cold plunging and saunas and all that. And so we do have some pretty legit facilities there for folks to take advantage of that.
Little Wim Hof method.
I don't know if other people do it. I mainly just chatter and suffer. I hate the cold water. I'm a much bigger fan of the heat than I am the cold.
Good stuff. And Rob, are you able to speak to the annual or monthly top line revenue range?
I'll
So
give
that way
you
the
our
listeners can understand the scale that you're operating at.
Yeah, I'll give folks our first 3 years. So we're year 6 in. Year 1 was 1.6. Year 2 was 7.5. Year 3 was 35. And I'll just say that the growth vector is very, very similar along the rest of the trajectory. But we've been pretty oblique about what that looks like going past that. And just as an aside, we are planning for good or ill to run this thing over the long haul. James wants to be one of the unique CEOs that takes something from initial concept all the way to iconic American brand. So he's hoping to still be in that chair 20 or 30 years from now. So we're not actually looking to be acquired. I would put a low probability of an IPO down the road because we don't like some of the constraints or the demands of like what a publicly traded company represents. So we're hopefully probably going to drive this thing over the long haul as hopefully a well stewarded, well run private company.
Yeah, well, it's phenomenal success. It's congratulations. Seems like you guys are doing the right things and have the right people in place. Let's pivot over to the ideal customer profile. Who are you targeting? Who are your biggest clients, and who are you focused on next?
You know, I guess I alluded to a little bit of this when we first started in. Anybody in that like low carb, keto, paleo, carnivore athlete, CrossFit, that's really like center of the bullseye. Those
Mm-hmm.
are our, just like super power users. Anybody kind of health conscious, anybody active. What we have found, one of the newer like massive subcategories that we have had huge traction with is what we're calling industrial athletes, like cowboys, linemen, HVAC installers, like people who do really hard work out in the environment and they get exposed to heat and cold and whatnot. We've just had huge buy-in from these folks. Our product is very sodium forward, so it's got a gram of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, 40 or 60 milligrams of magnesium, but we don't have sugar in the product. So where a lot of these folks, I think, historically would grab either an energy drink when they were, doing a lunch break or something like that, or they would do something like a Gatorade or a Powerade, which generally have much less sodium and tend to have a lot of sugar in them. I think a lot of these folks are finding that they feel much, much better getting that sodium forward type of electrolyte replenishment. And then when they aren't consuming extra sugar, they just feel good. So like that's been a really fascinating subcategory. Trying to think of other things. Any type of combat sports, like we are a, a primary sponsor of the PFL, the Professional Fight League. We just find folks within combat sports, or interestingly, any type of weight class sports. If these folks need to make weight cuts, they really need something to help rehydrate post cutting weight, and so we've had huge buy-in from boxing, Thai boxing, jujitsu, and then just MMA broadly. We've had some really wacky things like exclusively breast pumping moms. So this whole subcategory of moms that they have a kid, and either because of schedule or latching issues, they have to pump breast milk for their kids. And when you look at the mechanisms behind milk production, if the mom just drinks water, that doesn't actually facilitate milk production, because when milk is excreted through the mammary gland and into the breast tissue to be released, you need sodium as a co-transporter to get the proteins and the sugars and all that stuff to actually leave the body. And so for the mom to be able to actively manufacture as much milk as she kind of wants to, she actually needs a significant amount of sodium and fluid to be able to make that happen. And it was maybe like year 2 of our business, and we started getting tagged on a bunch of social media accounts where these breastfeeding moms would show like one tiny paltry little bottle that they pumped the previous day, and then they tried LMNT, and then they had like 5 bottles of milk, the next day. And so it just went like wildfire within that breastfeeding community. And then there's a condition called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It's where people will go from seated to standing, and they can pass out because the blood doesn't pump hard enough to maintain the fluid volume to keep them awake. It's an autoimmune driven condition. COVID, both the virus itself and the vaccine, seems to have left a lot of people with POTS. And so that was another community that has like the diagnoses of POTS just absolutely exploded post 2020. And the doctors that would work with these folks would say you need a lot more sodium. And then when folks would discover something like LMNT, it was really a convenient way to address that. So, I mean, that was a long rambling question, but like our center of the bullseye is kind of low carb athletes. And then it's just athletes generally. Again, what we call the industrial athlete, like HVAC workers, cowboys, just people who do real hard work, roofers, sheetrock installers, all that type of stuff, contractors. And then we have all these kind of wacky outlying verticals like breastfeeding moms, POTS, and things like that. And we're always discovering kind of new verticals, but it's usually somebody will reach out to us and they're like, hey, I've been struggling with this problem, and your product seems to beautifully address it. And, thank you. And usually what we end up doing then is, if we find a person in a particular community that finds success with it, we'll reach out to other folks in those communities and just offer to send them samples, and we'll just bury them with samples, and they'll try it and give it out to their community. Easily our best growth technique has been sampling. Like that hands down has been the best way that we've been able to add more people to the roster of subscribers.
And is it all direct to consumer, or are you also going after chains, distributors? Are you able to distinguish the percentage or volume of business between the different classifications?
Yeah. So we, again, for good or ill, like we won't know if this was a good idea or not for maybe like 5 or 10 more years, but we were very 100% focus on direct to consumer. The exception to that is that we would, as part of that direct to consumer, we had lots and lots of like doctors, chiropractors, gyms that were huge fans, and they wanted to become wholesale accounts. And so we actually have 4,500, 4,800 wholesale accounts in the United States, gyms, doctors' offices, chiropractors, naturopaths. So we actually have a pretty robust storefront in that regard, where people sell it to the folks coming through their doors. It's only been this last year, literally. We historically we've been a stick pack, but this last year we developed a canned sparkling version. And in getting the canned sparkling version out into a retail setting, those folks were also interested in the stick pack, and we went into Target, Walmart, and Costco Canada this year and did really, really well with that. Both in it's interesting. The stick pack is still probably the winner on that. Like the buy-in with the sparkling, it has been good, but it's still a super new product. Like a canned sparkling electrolyte is new. Like I think we were the first one to really do that. There may have been one or two others that were pretty small in footprint. Retail still represents a pretty small percentage of what we have going on, but it's grown significantly over the first year. I think that we were the fastest growing product to ever land in the Target and Walmart like supplement scene. We hit growth numbers within 15 weeks that most companies don't see for like 52 to 58 weeks. So it did really, really, really well in the retail setting, but we only have one year of retail to really look at, aside from, again, our wholesale partners, which are more like gyms, doctors' offices, and things like that.
Interesting. Okay. And when you think about operational pain points that you're running into when scaling supply chain, marketing, reporting, where are you seeing the biggest pain points now, and how are you approaching resolving those issues?
Yeah, so I guess one of our kind of contrarian approaches, like we don't have a marketing department, like we just don't. Clearly, we do some things that would classically be called marketing, but our primary focus is just building relationships with folks. We've been on Huberman, we've been on Tim Ferriss, we've been on Rogan, so we just find trusted health uh, resources that can articulate our message well and actually like the product. And we've had really great success with that. But we don't have what would be considered like a classic like marketing department or part of the organization. Supply chain is definitely a bastard. Like it's we use a special can for this, and they're hard to find. It has some interesting characteristics to it. And so uh, when you start reaching scale, when you start reaching, uh, a situation where the cost of just shipping things around the country is really remarkable. We developed more than one distribution, not just distribution, but manufacturing location. So we now have like East Coast, middle of the country, West Coast, as far as production, so that it decreases our shipping costs dramatically. Our shipping costs are a remarkable slice of our overall burden that we have to deal with. It eats at the profit margin. So that's been a pretty dynamic feature of the company, is kind of recognizing when to add another line to something. We've done a pretty good job of inventory management. I think we've had like 2 outages in 6 years. We had a really gnarly time during COVID, but right at the very beginning of COVID, I suspected that we were going to have a lot of supply chain issues. And mind you, we were less than a year old at that time, but we leveraged ourselves pretty hard to get 2 years worth of raw materials squirreled away, because I was afraid that like everything would shut down from China and stuff like that. And so one, we didn't run out of stuff, and then two, all of that raw material became way more expensive out on the free market. And so we actually were operating at kind of a comparative buffer because we had bought the stuff cheap before everything got really expensive, and because we bought so much of it, it was comparatively less expensive. Thinking about supply chain, we do run a small, comparatively small team, like given the amount of revenue that we do and the contacts that we have. I seem to remember like Snapple only had like 8 employees or something. Like they developed a pretty streamlined group of people that ran it, so it doesn't need to be a giant team. But we do ask a lot of folks, and so again, like helping to manage people's work life balance has been something that we invest a lot in. We do have some amount of attrition, like folks will the business will grow, and it just grows to a point sometimes where a given individual, they may be a wonderful person, they may do a great job, but just their skill set or their sentiment sometimes doesn't fit with the company, and so we have to part ways with them. I would say we've been averaging maybe about a 8 to 10% attrition in that regard year over year. Like there's probably about 10% of the team that turns over each year. I'm not sure if that covers
Sure.
some of that, the growth pains and whatnot thoroughly, but yeah, those are probably the top of mind things.
And so when you think about the marketing budget allocation between digital, retail, wholesale, paid ads, can you enlighten us with maybe percentage wise how you're looking at each of those media channels?
That's not actually my area of expertise, so I don't know the exact numbers on that. I do know that we lean heavily into the health partner relationships. Again, like the Huberman Labs and different things like that. We just have found really great success there, and it's maybe worth mentioning that early on we found like somebody might have 2 million followers on Instagram. They're a good looking guy, good looking gal, or whatever, but people are mainly there to look at those folks. You don't get great conversions on that. Like they're actually pretty awful. But you could have somebody who maybe has 100,000 followers on Instagram, but they are an actual coach or an athlete that kind of functions like a coach. Like people are there to learn from them. Those people produce wonderfully. Like they have a great conversion rate for us. And what we did pretty early on also is kind of develop some algorithms where we could identify like what we would call an A tier partner, a B tier partner, a C tier partner, and kind of identify some different characteristics around all of those. And we would actually then go to our B and C tier partners and say, hey, we've noticed that the people who are really killing it are doing these same things that you're doing, but they're also doing this or they're not doing that. And we would kind of help these B and C tier partners improve what they were doing. And so we would give them some feedback, sometimes not well received, usually pretty well received, but we were able to take a lot of B and C tier people and bring them up to A tier. And we've been able to then create this virtuous cycle, because when they start making more money, we make more money because we're selling more product and they're functioning in a more effective way. But it was largely taking insights of who was doing really, really well and kind of creating an algorithm around what went into that, and then helping other folks try to emulate some of those pieces.
Makes sense. And so, to your knowledge, is there some degree of direct ad placement on social media platforms, or
We do.
go
We
for it?
do a little bit of direct ad placement, but we actually just detest social media, like for a host of reasons. And we capped our budget 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So we haven't spent more on direct ads on social media platforms in the last 4 years, because we just are not fans of all of the drama and the way that those things operate and whatnot. And so we get out of that what we can get, but we have not doubled down on increasing ad spend there as we've grown. We would prefer sending a super kick-ass refrigerator and display to like a doctor's office that's representing us than we would dumping more money into Meta or Google or something like that. And again, that may not be the smartest move long term, but it's worked so far. And until that breaks, we're probably not going to change that.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so let's talk about tracking performance. What KPIs and metrics do you watch most closely?
I mean,
LTV, cost to customer acquisition,
we
or
definitely keep
something else?
an eye on all of that stuff. All lifetime customer value, how many insider bundle subscribers we have, and whatnot. I think that we are uh, profitability. I mean, profitability and how much cash on hand is just like it's hard to beat that, but then you need to
Hmm.
get a little bit more granular to be able to figure out how we're doing with things. We do look at those the like customer acquisition costs in different verticals, and we do have some benchmarks that we are constantly tweaking there. We also just really mundane stuff like on the supply chain side. We have folks constantly fiddling with like how much shit we can put on a pallet. Like we've had people figure out little tweaks where it'll save us $5 million in a year because we're able to palletize the thing more simply. And I think people just get really lazy on that front. Like we brought in a guy who's a great designer and also an engineer, and that's what he does. He just fiddles with a bunch of those things. And now that that was important before, but now that we are going into Costco and Walmart and Target, each one of those folks wants a different like SKU count and a little different look and everything. So each one of those setups fits on a pallet in a different way. And so we will spend a fair amount of bandwidth just kind of optimizing along those lines. But we definitely look at those standard KPI things like customer acquisition costs and things like that. But we are, I think, a little bit different in that we are not terrorized by those numbers. Like we will step back and still make very objective decisions, even if something looks like it's maybe not going in a favorable direction. It's like, is that real feedback? Is that something else? So we're really skeptical of a lot of those numbers. And because we aren't trying to be acquired in like a 2-year time cycle, a 4-year time cycle, like we're planning on being here for the long haul, I think we look at all that stuff with like a 5-year, 10-year time horizon. So it allows us to look at something and we're like, okay, we're going to keep an eye on that, but we're not going to freak out because we don't have to fix everything right this minute. We're profitable. We have good cash on hand, all that type of stuff. So we'll look at this thing, but we really before we make an adjustment, it's kind of like within medicine, like first do no harm. I think that people will see numbers and they'll kind of freak out, and then they start changing things. They'll change things so often that you don't even know if what you adjusted, the lever you pulled, is really the thing that altered. Like if there's some consumer softening and you start blaming, let's say there's consumer softening broadly, but then you start attributing that consumer softening, that decrease in revenue or subscribers, to some internal processes, you may end up breaking something that was actually really good and was just fine, but it was just like there was consumer softening, like it's a different time of year or something like that. So we're kind of circumspect about those things. So we definitely look at, I think, the same things that everybody else looks at, but instead of like just freaking out every quarter whether something's up or down. It's kind of like if things are up, it's like, okay, that's cool. But I don't know that I believe that it's because we're geniuses or we're doing anything right. It may still be because it's an accident. I think
Hmm.
I think we're much more circumspect than many companies are about that stuff because we like the long-term trend line a lot more than like a month over month or even a quarter over quarter win or something like that.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of, well, just really fundamental difference of being thinking reactively versus thinking critically and thoughtfully and strategically. So I can appreciate that. And so, how about in terms of implementation of AI or automation in operations, lead generation, reporting? What's worked? What hasn't worked?
That's a really good question. When we started, and clearly we started off smaller. First year was 1.6 million, so which is great for a first year. But I am kind of weird in that I insisted that we have real living, breathing people interfacing with folks, at least initially. And we still do that. Like our CX, we have an actually decent size team that handles a bunch of CX. We've leaned into AI for the highly repetitious 100% win type things. So like, I want to change my subscription status. I want to cancel. I want to, things like that are like a guaranteed home run. There's not like a subtle touch that's necessary with it. We've leaned into AI with that quite strongly. Trying to think of other areas, but then as the questions or the inquiries get a little bit more granularity to it, then they get pumped to a human being. And what we've found with that, it's expensive, but it saves us so much drama again around like social media. If we do a shit job of dealing with people, they jump on social media and they will just absolutely crucify you. And so I think we've had generally like if a box gets lost or it gets damaged or something like that, somebody receives a damaged box, we just send them a new one. No question to ask. We don't want it back. Like boom, we just send it. If the thing we have very, very tight tracking, but if it appears that something got lost in shipping, we will proactively just send out another one and we'll tell the person, hey, we're sending you another one. It looks like something got messed up in the shipping. If the other one arrives, good on you, like hand it out to some friends, do whatever you want to with it. So we really customer service the pants off people. And as good as AI generally is, I think for really repetitious stuff, I don't think it still has the fine dexterity to deal with more questions. We have people ask, more detailed questions around health and whatnot. Also, trying to think of where else. Content generation. We don't really use much AI on that. I generate a lot of content, but then we've been farming it out to some outside folks for some spit polish off of that. Trying to think
And
of
what
where
content are
else.
you
Yeah.
generating, Rob? Can you
Oh,
elaborate on
just
that?
like blogs, framework for the emails that go out, ideas, and also kind of like framework skeletons for like if somebody jumped onto Instagram or Facebook or X or something like that, they might see an ad for us, and so I help to generate some of the material around, hey, maybe that's a good idea, and then give it a give it some bones, and then people will flesh it out from there. We have a great content team. Like I've just been recommending that we go out and shoot video with a lot of our partners. So like we did a piece with Dr. Mike Israel. He's a great guy, has a huge following online, and our other co-founder Luis Villasenor, he lifted weights with them because both those guys are bodybuilders, and then I did a bunch of jiu-jitsu with him because Dr. Mike's a black belt and I'm a black belt, so we did some video of us rolling, and so that was an idea that I had to generate that. Uh, Trying to think of what else. Trying to go back to your original question around where AI is plugging into things. I know that there's some things, mainly on the like short sorting and shuffling of inbound questions, emails, even phone calls. Like we have a 1-800 number, so when people call, like the AI will transcribe that, and to some degree, like shoot the person an email if they give us an email, or it'll get funneled to a meat bot, and a living, breathing person will reply in some way. We definitely are integrating that stuff, but I think that we do lean heavily into living, breathing folks to address the more fine touch points. People get it. Like if they send us an email, you get an automated response. Hey, we'll get back to you within like 3 hours or something like that. But then somebody actually really gets back to you.
And when you mentioned the newsletter as an example, I imagine that these are mostly existing customer base.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct? Okay. And are you able to speak to any numbers behind that subscriber base?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've got. Do I have a copy? So one thing that we did, I don't know if I have a copy right here, but we started doing an actual. So during COVID, here's a little bit of my uh, weird under the hood stuff, but I started getting concerned about like censorship and deplatforming and stuff like that. Even though all we do is sell salt, I was just kind of like, that it happens, so we started sending out a physical newsletter to people, and that goes out to about 400,000 people quarterly, and we'll take the best of our online content that we've typically generated in that quarter, and then usually some unique content, and then we'll send that out to folks. And I think it's about 400,000 people that goes out to.
And is that able to be sourced accessed through the main website?
No, we physically mail it to them. That was part of the thing.
Oh, I thought you had both.
We do both.
Okay.
We do both, but if you want the compendium, the near book, like it's probably 30, 40 pages long, it's only a physical copy. We don't actually provide that one digitally, and you have to be an Insider Bundle subscriber, and you have to receive it physically. Yeah, and we did that on purpose because we wanted a workaround. Like if the internet gods decided to decapitate us, that we still had a direct link and relationship with our customers. Yeah.
Is there a subscription cost required with that?
No. Well, I mean, people have to be an Insider Bundle subscriber, so they have to be actively buying product on a specific cadence to be part of that. Yeah.
I see. Okay, and that makes sense.
I'll grab something here really quick too. This didn't go out to everybody, but like a bunch of our really power users, we sent them this Yeti case, which had all kinds of cool swag.
Nothing but the best.
Yeah. Because a lot of our folks are police, military, and fire, like we sent it, and like our owners, we did do a crowdfund round. We didn't need the money, but we wanted people to be able to come along for the ride with us. And so people who were part of that crowdfunding round, that's where the Yeti case went, and we had a bunch of product and water bottles, and then people got a challenge coin, like what is commonly given out in like police, military, fire circles. And people just went crazy over it. I mean, absolutely lost their minds. And it was expensive. Like each one of those that we sent out, it was expensive. But we have customers for life now, and people would protect us, in a knife fight, because we really take good care of them, and we enjoy being able to be profitable enough to be able to do some fun stuff like that. So I think where and when you can do some excite and delight stuff for people that is really meaningful, whether it's a hat, a t-shirt, we have kind of a graded thing where as people buy more stuff, they get bigger and better swag, and we don't tell them about it. It just shows up. So that surprise is kind of cool. And then doing things like that, I think is pretty cool too. And when the newsletter first started landing, people just lost their minds. They were so excited because we are so digital, but this kind of nice printed bound newsletter that's like everything that's going on in the element world. It usually had a little bit of an update about what we were up to, and then all the science and technical pieces that we had generated over the quarter. It was incredibly popular. And again, I had that idea mainly as a workaround. Like if we started getting throttled or losing our access to people online, like what's a way to have a more direct connection with them, and we would be able. Those are our power users. Like they represent a really disproportionate number of our revenue. So like even if we got deplatformed, like we would still have a direct relationship with those folks and could potentially at least keep the lights on until we got that figured out.
I think it's a perfect example of the difference between looking at a customer base and not like a transaction, but establishing a relationship. And then once you have a loyal customer and you stand behind them, then you got them for life. So it's awesome. Good stuff. And how about looking forward in the next 12 to 18 months? What specific outcomes are you aiming for? Is it a revenue milestone, new markets, product line expansion? What's
It's
next?
funny. So like we did our yearly planning last year in October. So coming up on a year ago. And we sat down and we said, okay, we're gonna launch two new SKUs, and it was going to be a lemonade and then we were lemonade, and then we were hoping to have like one flavor of these guys for our wholesale partners, or it's something like that. I forget exactly. We ended up getting an opportunity to meet with Target and Walmart and Costco Canada. And so our yearly planning was launching two new SKUs. We launched 17 new SKUs. We did a lemonade stand, which you might look this up. Like we sent out 2,000 really kick-ass lemonade stands for kids for like our junior entrepreneur program, and gave them profit and loss sheets, and we gave them a wholesale account and everything. We launched that. We launched lemonade as a separate deal. So our yearly planning was to do two things. We did really like 21 new SKUs, new products that went out. And it was a massive year. And we cannot do back to back years like that. We had a massive growth year from like year 2 to year 3. And then year 4, we had an internal um, saying, which was uh, gosh, what was it? Simplify to amplify. So like we had to slow down and pare things down and kind of collect ourselves. And so this next year is slow is smooth, smooth is fast, which is again kind of out of like the marksmanship and military stuff and whatnot. We're trying to get people to slow down and do things in a smooth, efficient fashion so that then we can be ready to go faster and bigger at some subsequent point. But we had a amazing growth year. We landed in a bunch of locations that last year in October we had no inkling we were going to do. We had a few little brushes with these big retailers with Costco and Target and Walmart and whatnot, but they seemed really kind of a pain in the ass to deal with, and we weren't really sure if we wanted to bite, take a bite off of that quite yet. And then we went and met with them, and they were super excited to do some work with us. So we just had to like stomp on the accelerator and go. And it was a shockingly demanding year. And I think that we would I we've had remarkable growth, but I think you have to like it's almost like being in a car or a rocket, and you start feeling it like coming apart at the seams a little bit. It's like, do we want this thing to keep flying permanently, or do we want to push it so hard that it blows up, that we do something wrong that's a catastrophic mistake? So this next year is going to be it's a very modest online revenue increase. It's only going to be a 10% increase in revenue. Typically, we've had multiple a full digit, 100, 200, 300% online revenue increase expectations year over year. That is a fraction of what it historically has been, being at 10%, which is still good, given our top line revenue. And then we just want to consolidate and modestly expand our retail footprint. So we want to make sure that we can really thoroughly do a great job within Target, Walmart, Costco, and we are looking at launching into some other retail locations, and we just want to do a really really great job with that. So we're going to slow down, really figure out what we're doing, make sure we're doing it excellently. Then probably so that'll get us through 2026. Then by 2027, like I do think we have two limited time offer flavors that we're going to do. These are things that we usually drop in either the summer or the winter, and they're there for 6 weeks, and then that's it. And it's usually like you know, in winter it's like a chai spice latte, or something specific to that. But we are going to do two limited time offers on flavors, but that's super modest compared to what we did this last year, which was we launched 4 flavors in these guys, 4 flavors in the 12-ounce tall skinnies. We had to iterate all of the SKU counts because Target wanted a certain composition, Walmart wanted a certain composition, Costco wanted a certain composition. So each one of those things needed to be completely rejiggered. The packaging, the palette designs and everything. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it was an absolutely massive undertaking. So this next year is pretty modest in scope. Like it's mainly just don't fuck up what we've been doing. Like just do what we're doing, do it well, but there's not a massive expectation of like this big jump over this next year. I think we'll get our feet under us, feel consolidated, and I think try to feel really secure that we're doing an excellent job with where we are. And then maybe 2027 to 28, we get some more ambitious goals.
What industry trends like nutrition, wellness, consumer behavior do you think are going to have the biggest impact for LMNT looking over the next 12 months?
I think the Maha gig, which I know is just like a just toxic topic to bring up, whether you're for it or against it, like you just mention it and it's like, oh my God, like, firing squad even trying to talk about it, which is fascinating because if it's really important, then maybe we should really fucking talk about it, whether you agree with it or not. But I think the Maha gig, like they've been going after food colors and maltodextrin and food additives and all this type of stuff. And I do think it's going to really upset the apple cart in a lot of the food manufacturing space. So if you're not in that space, it may not matter to you too much. But I think for us being in that consumer product good area, I think a lot of people are really watching the Maha scene very, very closely to figure out where everything is going to play out. Like they're really going after seed oils, maltodextrin, artificial flavor or natural and artificial flavors, natural and artificial colors. And some of it I agree with, and some of it I just think is madness because I have a chemistry and a toxicology background. And what I've seen roll out is maybe about 50% of it. I'm like, that's really on point. And maybe 50% of them, like, this is just absolute madness, which I find I'm in a very odd position where I'm like, supportive of some of the stuff and really antagonistic to other parts of it. One of our main counsel, he was 26 years at Garden of Life. Like he co-founded Garden of Life and helped steward that to an acquisition over at Nestle for pretty remarkable sum. Jeff Brahms, he's been following and going to a lot of these like industry meetings where like Maha related stuff is occurring. He's been showing up there and talking to people and trying to put his finger, both understand which direction the wind is blowing, but also try to get some of our influence into what's happening on that front.
That's fascinating. Listen, Rob, I could talk to you all day. You're an intelligent guy. You're running a phenomenal business. It's been an incredible conversation. Thanks for sharing your journey, your insights on growth, the lessons learned from scaling LMNT. For all our listeners, if you want to follow Rob's work and the LMNT story, check out Drink LMNT, that's LMNT.com, and connect with Rob. That's it for today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with anyone who's curious about how innovation, tech, and growth intersect. I'm Jim Hoover, and we'll see you on the next one. Rob, any other places you want to leave the guests for more information?
I do very little online. Substack.robwolf.com. It's with 2 B's. And then my wife and I do, however, do a weekly podcast most weeks. It's called The Healthy Rebellion Radio. And we answer just any broad variety of like health and performance related questions there, but that's called The Healthy Rebellion Radio.
Perfect. Well, find the show, and you've convinced me, Rob. I'll be a customer.
Awesome.
And everybody else, thank you for your time. We'll see you on the next one.